F-Zero was in its prime was about the arcade racer, and that's my jam. I love the music. I love everything about it. I want an F-Zero so badly. Should just that next week we should have a podcast just about F-Zero. Just talk about all the nuances of F-Zero. Actually, one interesting thing that I want to cover before we jump into the topics, though, because I mentioned Dark Souls. Have you guys been paying attention to this kind of I guess movement or sort of conversation that's been going on about Sekiro and there maybe being an easy difficulty? A lot of people feel like there should be an easy difficulty. How do you guys feel about that? Because I love hard games, but I'll let you guys go.
Right. I think an easy mode is probably something that I don't know if they should have done it, but I think it would have been something that would have been nice. Just because I feel like games nowadays, a lot of games focus on being able to be played by everyone, and there's things when you have too hard a difficulty, you cut off a large number of people who just can't play the game because they're not going to be able to finish it, and they're just gonna get in and not even be able to play because it's just too hard for them. And you see a lot of games that are kind of harder, like Celeste. That's a kind of harder platformer game, but it has if you go and it has more accessible things that you can optional things that you can turn on. I'm not exactly sure what they are because I haven't looked, but there are ways to make the game easier, and I feel like we've been talking about Pokemon. We're like, oh, I wish Pokemon had a hard mode because that game's too easy for a lot of us. So I feel like it's just more options for more people to have fun is always a good thing.
An interesting point.
I'm not against the idea of an easy mode per se, but I do think that people who play on the mode that it's meant to be played on needs to be rewarded for it. Because I feel that From Software's whole fan base, or I guess people who just like difficult games, whether we were talking about From Software or old school NES games or something, a lot of these people play them because they're difficult. So if we kind of make it so that it's on equal levels, then I feel like it won't be as popular in the difficulty aspect as people would want it to be, I guess. If it's marketed as a difficult game and people like the challenge and like playing it, then those people should be rewarded. Kind of like if you play a Kingdom Hearts game on a harder difficulty, you get a better ending or a secret ending or something along those lines.
Yeah, I kind of see where you both are coming from, and I also want to address the side that's hey, there should definitely be an easy mode in Sekiro and other hard games because there's just some people who can't handle it. But the game is designed to punish you. That is the game. You are meant to die, right? I remember when I played Bloodborne for the first time, I probably would never have figured out how to get to the hub world if I didn't die. It's by design that you die to get to the hub world, right? That's how most people probably get to the hub world for the first time, by dying, right? The game is designed around that, and it's meant to challenge you. That's how it's all kind of created and then thought about. So by creating an easy mode, you're taking away from the design of the game. Do you guys understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah, and I do agree with that, which is why I feel that the easy mode that I guess hypothetically they would add to a game like Dark Souls or Sekiro, it needs to be done in such a way that it takes away a good portion of what is the game, in a sense, the experience of the game.
Which I'm not okay with. The experience of the game is that's
I think that it depends on how much you lower it, because I think obviously if it's for people who have a harder time playing the game, if it's an easier mode, they're probably still going to die a lot just because they're not as good. So that's why the mode exists for them. So obviously you don't want to make it so easy that literally any casual person could pick it up and not die a bunch. You just want to make it easier so that they can actually have a chance at the game, but not so easy that they're not, actually being challenged.
I would be okay with an optional, so if you go to, I think Nintendo started doing this, they did definitely start during the Wii days, but one game that I can think of that they were doing it in was the Mario Galaxy games. When you were dying a lot, at some point you would be given a question, hey, do you want help, right? That may be the alternative that could be the happy compromise, right? Where I don't want them to change the game at all, but maybe if the game sees that you're really struggling somewhere, right, more so than what would be considered normal, maybe at that point you get some sort of prompts. It's like, hey, do you want like some sort of tip spirit or something like that could help guide you a little bit more? Maybe that, and that's something that would be optional, and maybe it could even be something that you would be prompted at the beginning of the game if you even want that prompt to ever come up, right? Because some people might even be upset that prompt would even come up sometimes. Sometimes,
yeah, I can see that being annoying.
It bothers me. It's like, hey, what? Especially with Donkey Kong Country, it's like, oh, do you want the Super Kong to help you? No, screw you for even suggesting that. I can handle this, right? Like, I'm actually offended. So I think maybe they could have like a prompt at the beginning of the game where there's a question that comes up to see if you would even want that to come up if you do die a lot. And even when you do die a lot, that's when it comes up if you opt for that part of the game. But in terms of the actual core game experience, it needs to stay the same because that takes away from the vision of what the game is all about. And I'll also say, I don't even think beating Dark Souls or Bloodborne, or I haven't played Sekiro yet, but my interpretation of that, like, I don't think people who beat it are necessarily really good, right? I think people who play it, like, it's supposed to make everyone feel good, like, no matter if your skill level, like, if as long as you're a relatively competent gamer, if you play it, and you will eventually beat the game. Like, it's meant to teach you. That's how I feel about it, at least.
Yeah, and I mean, a game like Dark Souls or From Software games, they're specifically designed to give you that rush of I don't know what you call it, like a positive feeling for when you finally beat an area that's just so difficult, or it just, you know, it gives you that satisfaction. And I feel like if you put it in easy mode, you give players kind of like an easy way out, so they don't have to have that feeling.
Yeah, which I think would just take away from the game. It wouldn't be the same.
Right, and the way I look at it, games like Dark Souls are just, because they're designed in such a way, they're designed for a specific audience in mind, in a similar way why somebody wouldn't pick up a Kirby game expecting it to be a difficult game.
Right, I'm not buying Yoshi. It's too easy.
Yeah, and
it's not for me.
Like, right, and in that degree, I guess the argument is, do you want those games to be harder and Dark Souls to be easier as like a middle ground for both, or would you rather game developers just kind of stick to what their demographic is or what they're aiming for, I guess?
Right. Yeah, I think some games are just going to have their direction. Like a movie, a painting, music, they have their own artistic direction. And no one really, most of the time, people don't really complain about that artistic direction. It's not necessarily meant for everyone. So I think that's fine. I don't think they should change anything. If the company wants to look at the outcry and decide maybe we should make a compromise, I think the idea I brought up would be the best compromise. But I don't even think that's necessary. I'd be fine. I would be, if they never did it, I'd be like 100% okay with that. And so, you know, that's where I stand on it, at least.
Yeah. I mean, as far as Shifty, you said earlier that they need some kind of incentive for you to play on the normal difficulty, the harder difficulty. Just an idea I had is maybe there's some kind of maybe a second run that you can only access through playing beating the harder difficulty that has different enemies. Maybe they're changed up, or maybe there's a special final secret boss fight that you can unlock if you do the harder difficulty, something like that. I think if they were to give an easy mode to, you know, make you feel like you should play on the harder difficulty so you can unlock the extra content at the end.
So the thing about that, and Shifty, correct me if I'm wrong, because I think you know about these games a little bit more than I do, but most of the Souls games have a new game plus already, right? Like you're meant to play through it again. Like there's certain changes and things that you obtain by doing that. So what you're suggesting, right, would be that the easy mode would punish you for not even having that as an option when you beat the game. Right? Is that am I right with the new game plus thing, Shifty?
Well, I'm not specifically saying that to an extent, but there is like a new game plus in Dark Souls and games like that. But you can kind of new game plus that series like 16 times in a row if you want, and it'll progressively like level up the enemies and, you know, make them hit harder and that kind of thing. But in terms of what specifically they could do for an easy mode, it could be like a multitude of different things. Realistically, it could be, you know, removing that. It could be certain optional bosses are just not in the game in the easier modes, or maybe the ending is different, something like that.
Okay. Even, yeah, I guess like additional story that you would get by playing the actual normal playthrough would be maybe an appropriate incentive. That's one way to maybe go about it.